Does the perfect high IQ crime really exist? Over the next 10 years, I'm going to walk you through every mind-bending suspense film from around the world. And today's film is taking lives. There is a serial killer like this, and he does not kill for the sake of killing, but to steal other people's lives. He is like a greedy hermit crab, killing his victims, then moving into their homes, spending their money, and living their lives. The most chilling part is that this killer kept up the disguise for a full 19 years, and even an FBI agent became part of his prey. The story does not begin at a grisly murder scene, but inside a car heading to Montreal. A young man named Martin is sitting by the window, and beside him is a boy around his age named Matt. Matt is a typical rich kid, the kind who can casually pull out a stack of cash to buy a ticket, yet still complains that his father did not give him enough. And the way Martin looks at Matt is filled with hunger. Halfway through the trip, the bus engine breaks down, and all the passengers are forced to stay behind. In a hurry to get moving, Matt suggests that the two of them rent a car, but not long after they drive off, the old car gets a flat tire. Matt has no idea how to change a tire, because someone as pampered as him knows nothing about it. Right at that moment, Martin says something that sends a chill down your spine.
You and I are about the same height, Matt.
What?
This is not a crime of impulse, but a change of identity. Martin picks up a rock from the roadside and smashes Matt's face. Because he wants to take over this identity, he takes Matt's credit cards and driver's license. And from that moment on, Martin no longer exists in this world, as he disappears into the crowd and begins a life of deadly deception that lasts for decades. 19 years later, at a construction site in Montreal, an excavator unexpectedly digs up the body of an unidentified man. The condition of the body is extremely strange, with both hands cut off at the wrists, the face completely crushed, and nothing on him that could prove who he was. The police are out of options, so they have no choice but to bring in the FBI's legendary profiler, Ileana. Ileana's entrance is incredibly unusual, because she does not examine the evidence, nor does she question the medical examiner, but instead lies down directly in the pit where the body was buried. In criminal investigation, this is called empathic profiling, because she is stepping into the killer's point of view and recreating the killer's path in her mind at a 1-to-1 scale. The first thing she says after standing up is this:
I think it was premeditated.
Ileana points to the edge of the pit and presents a crucial piece of evidence.
You can tell because see this, the corners, they're neat, they're symmetrical. The proportions are precise. They're exactly 5 foot 11 inches. Your victim 5'10"?
Yes, exactly.
This proves that the killer did not panic and bury the body in a rush after the murder, but had already dug this perfect grave in advance. He chose to bury the body at a construction site precisely because he wanted it to be discovered one day. Ileana is not just an agent, but more like a precision scanner of human nature. Yet she has one fatal weakness. In order to maintain this extreme level of focus, she has cut off all of her emotional connections. When she eats, she stares at photos of corpses to suppress her appetite. Or rather, she uses this method to keep herself immersed in darkness at all times. The next day, a new case happens. This time in the parking lot of a gym. The killer uses the same method, strangling the victim first, then smashing the face with a rock. But this time, what the killer did not expect was that a witness suddenly appeared at the scene. This witness is named James, and he is trembling at the police station, with the victim's blood all over his clothes. He tells the police that he tried to save the victim, but could not save him. His eyes drift, his speech is confused, and he looks exactly like an ordinary citizen suffering a severe stress reaction after a traumatic event. Ileana walks into the interrogation room and does not rush to question him, but simply watches James first. James is drawing, because he is a gallery owner, and he is able to draw the killer's face. Pay attention to James's movements, because he lights a cigarette with his right hand, although his hands are shaking too badly to get it lit. And he also draws with his right hand, but judging from the ligature marks on the victim's neck, the killer is left-handed. That single detail immediately rules James out as a suspect, but Ileana still wants to test him, so she deliberately drops the murder weapon from the evidence bag onto the floor.
That was around his neck, right? Am I right?
After James gets up from the chair, he is horrified, nauseated, and completely incoherent.
You did that on purpose?
All right, look, I'm doing my best here. All right, that man's face was half gone. All right, I couldn't even, he didn't even look human.
That kind of fear is just too real. But when Ileana leaves, she deliberately leaves the case file behind. If James were the killer, he would definitely sneak a look at how many clues the police had. But James completely ignores the top secret file and stays intensely focused on revising the killer's sketch on the paper. As a profiler, Ileana has her own set of FBI criminal psychology theories.
We have very different brain patterns. You say words like tree, sofa, house, rape, incest, murder. A normal person's brain pattern changes, their frontal lobe reacts. Psychopaths have no reaction. They feel the same about rape and murder as they do about eating dinner.
But every one of James's instinctive reactions proves that he really is just an ordinary man who happened to stumble onto this murder case by accident. Perfect logic, perfect testing, perfect probing, and Ileana completely rules James out as a suspect. Meanwhile, the skull reconstruction results come back, and the identity of the first body is confirmed. The victim's name is Henry, and he is a free diver. The investigation shows that Henry has been missing for several weeks, but the strange thing is that during the time after his death, his credit card has still been used frequently, and even the tax bills for his apartment have been paid on schedule. Just then, a lead appears from the killer sketch drawn by James, as the owner of a riverside motel recognizes the man in the portrait as a tenant staying at his place. This tenant behaved in an extremely strange way, paying 3 months of rent in cash up front, and after that, no one ever saw him again. Ileana leads the team and pushes open the door, and an overpowering stench of decay hits them in the face. While the eerie sound of running water comes from the bathroom, an officer pulls out his gun and yanks the shower curtain open, but there is no one inside, and Ileana sharply notices a loose opening in the ceiling. She steps onto a chair and moves the panel aside, only to find a brown paper bag hidden above it. When she opens the bag, she finds not only some men's personal items, but also a finger that has been cut off at the base. And above the ceiling, there is even a body hidden there. The two of them are so terrified that they keep backing away. Inside the ring on that severed finger, a name is engraved: William Edward. After checking his identity, Edward is confirmed to be a 34-year-old deep-sea sailor. The most frightening part is that his credit card was used just yesterday. Ileana's profiling skills strike again, piecing together the core logic of this serial case, and she presents to the task force a theory that shocks everyone: the hermit crab theory. The killer is not only taking lives, but also stealing the victims' identities. He killed Edward, then moved into his apartment, used his credit cards, and even paid his taxes, continuing to live exactly the way Edward did. In other words, the killer is like a hermit crab. Whenever he feels that his current identity is no longer safe, or grows tired of the shell he is wearing, he looks for a new victim who has a similar build and lives alone, then removes that person and takes his place. At the same time, news comes from James's side that his gallery has been robbed. Ileana rushes to the scene and finds that only some client records are missing. James looks completely helpless and says that he had originally arranged to meet a major client named Edward, but Edward had already died at the motel, and his identity has already been used up by the killer, which means the killer's next target is James, because James is the only eyewitness, and he is a single art dealer with a respectable life. He is the perfect next shell. The police decide to play along and use James as bait to catch the killer at the art exhibition. On the way back, James asks Ileana to escort him, and the two talk a lot along the way. James casually talks about his past, and Ileana also opens up in a way she never has before. She says that when she was 12 years old, she killed a 16-year-old intruder in her home in self-defense, and that has remained a permanent thorn in her heart. After hearing this, James's eyes become gentle and deep, and he realizes that beneath the strength of this powerful female FBI agent, there is actually a little girl longing for redemption. The next day, after checking the call records from the motel's landline, the police discover that over a period of time, the killer made more than 20 frantic calls to an elderly woman named Rebecca. And this Mrs. Rebecca had come to the police station 3 weeks earlier to file a report, claiming that she had seen her son, who died 19 years ago, at the dock. Ileana goes to Mrs. Rebecca's house and takes out the sketch James drew. And Mrs. Rebecca recognizes at a glance that this is her dead son, Martin. As the conversation continues, Ileana opens a dusty family photo album, and a deeply twisted, suffocating family tragedy is completely uncovered. It turns out that Mrs. Rebecca had twin sons. The older brother was named Reese, and he was born only 3 minutes earlier than his younger brother Martin. In Mrs. Rebecca's eyes, Reese was flawless.
He was just charismatic, outgoing.
But when they were 14 years old, the brothers had an accident while rafting on the river. Reese drowned while trying to save Martin after he fell into the water, and only Martin managed to crawl back to shore.
After he died, Martin just took a strange turn. He became violent. And when he was 16, he stole most of my jewelry and ran away.
Mrs. Rebecca's tone is filled with disgust and hatred toward her younger son Martin. This spacious house is filled with photos, trophies, and keepsakes of the older brother Reese, while every trace of Martin has been erased completely. Deep down in the mother's subconscious, she has always believed that it was the unwanted Martin who caused the death of her beloved Reese. Just as Ileana is about to leave, the profiler's intuition proves itself again, because she sharply senses an unusual draft of air passing near the bookshelf, and the small hanging ornament beside it is swaying gently. In order to find out the truth, Ileana forcibly transfers Mrs. Rebecca to a police-protected hotel under the excuse of safety. After that, she returns alone to that eerie mansion in the dead of night. She pushes open the heavy bookshelf, and a hidden passage suddenly appears. As she walks down the steps into the basement, Ileana is completely shocked by what she sees. The basement is dark and damp, with nothing but a small bed and countless broken dolls. Every doll has its hands snapped off, and its face smeared beyond recognition with paint, matching the condition of the serial murder victims in a horrifyingly exact way. There are also several words carved into the wall with a knife. Ileana lies down on that narrow child's bed and closes her eyes. And at last, she understands the core of this monster. Martin's twisted nature comes from years of emotional abuse and obsession within his family. His mother saw him as a killer and locked him inside this lightless dungeon. From childhood, he was branded as guilty and unwanted, and he came to hate the identity of Martin with all his heart. So he had to escape. His hermit crab-style pattern of crime is, at its core, an extreme form of identity anxiety. When he takes a life, he is really trying to destroy the broken version of himself from the past. And when he steals other people's identities, he is desperately reaching for what he believes is a normal life. To completely confirm the truth behind Martin's staged death, Ileana applies to have Martin's grave from 19 years ago dug up. The result of the exhumation lands like a brutal slap in the face, because the forensic report shows that the remains in the coffin have multiple fractures all over the body, while according to his mother, Martin had only ever suffered one minor arm fracture while he was alive. The person lying in that grave is not Martin at all, but the very first stand-in he killed at the age of 16, the rich kid Matt whom he met by chance in the car. The monster never died. He is somewhere in this city, silently watching everyone. In order to lure Martin out, and also to protect James as a witness, the police put together a bold trap. James sits nervously in a bar wearing a wire, but instead of waiting for the killer, he receives a taunting note. The operation is declared a failure, and James breaks down emotionally, lashing out at the police for being useless. To calm him down, Ileana grows much closer to him. Inside that art-filled gallery, under the shadow of mortal danger, that rush of fear and attraction makes Ileana fall completely. She breaks her professional code and falls for this fragile yet magnetic witness. But the danger is not over, and the police decide to move James to another location, just after Officer Paquette goes upstairs to help him pack. And while another officer is waiting downstairs, the real nightmare arrives. The killer, who should have vanished by then, somehow slips into the apartment without a sound and grabs James in an instant.
You have something that I want. So this idea of running away, it's not gonna happen. What did you tell the police about me?
James fights back desperately, kicks the attacker away, pulls out a gun, and shouts for help. The officer downstairs hears it and rushes upstairs. At that very moment, Ileana has just arrived outside the apartment building, and before she can even make it upstairs, she hears 2 piercing gunshots. When she pulls her gun and charges into the apartment, she sees only her fellow officer lying in a pool of blood with no sign of life left, while both James and the killer are gone. Then suddenly, the roar of an engine comes from below, and Ileana sprints downstairs like a woman possessed, slams her foot on the gas, and launches into a heart-pounding chase through downtown Montreal. The killer speeds through the streets with James in the car, and Ileana stays locked on them without letting go. In the end, the killer's car crashes into a roadblock, rolls over, and bursts into flames. James crawls out of the car, his face covered in blood, still shaken to the core, and the killer in the driver's seat is already smashed beyond recognition. James seems completely broken by fear, as he grabs the gun from inside the car and fires wildly into the body again and again, screaming hysterically while he shoots. In the next second, leaking fuel ignites and triggers a violent explosion, and the entire car, along with the killer's body, is swallowed whole by a towering blaze. Afterward, forensic investigators recovered DNA from the burned wreckage, and it is a complete match for the hair left behind in the second parking lot murder. Every piece of evidence points to one conclusion: the serial killer Martin is finally dead, and the case is officially closed. That night, James comes to Ileana's room, and after everything they have survived, the last of their defenses collapses. Ileana is no longer the cold profiler, but simply a woman who needs someone to hold her. That night becomes the happiest moment of Ileana's life. Because of the strain from intense physical activity, James's wound reopens the next morning, and the 2 of them go to the hospital to have it treated. Then Ileana receives word that Martin's mother has come to identify the body. This is the true peak of the entire film, and it is also where the reversal begins. Standing in front of that body burned black beyond recognition, Mrs. Rebecca shows not even a trace of sorrow. She steps forward and stares coldly into the corpse's eyes for 1 second, then shakes her head with complete certainty. Without saying a single word, she turns and walks away in a hurry, her steps almost frantic, carrying an indescribable and overwhelming terror. Ileana runs after her, but Mrs. Rebecca gets into the elevator and desperately keeps pressing the closed door button. Just after the elevator doors shut, a voice appears behind her.
Hello, Mother.
Only 4 simple words, yet they land like a death sentence. James slowly moves closer to his mother, who has nowhere left to retreat.
All I ever wanted was to love you. But you wouldn't let me. It was always Reese. Because you could have had me forever. But you ruined it. You ruined everything.
You don't frighten me.
At the same time, Ileana is sprinting down the stairs because she realizes something is terribly wrong. When she finally runs into the lobby, gasping for breath, and the elevator doors open with a sharp ding, one of the most unforgettable scenes in suspense film history appears before her. Mrs. Rebecca lies in a pool of blood, and James is cutting off her head. The truth is so brutal it leaves you breathless. There never was any innocent eyewitness. James, the trembling gallery owner sitting in the interrogation room, is the serial killer Martin, and the burned body inside the car belonged to an art thief named Hart. James owed him more than $80,000, so Martin turned the situation to his advantage. He first killed Hart and Officer Paquette, then stuffed Hart's body into the driver's seat while he himself sat in the passenger seat, staging an entire kidnapping, crash, and explosion right under Ileana's nose, all to burn away Hart's real face. And when James fired wildly at the scene, it was not because he was afraid, but because he wanted to make absolutely sure Hart was dead and could never speak again. With flawless acting, Martin fooled the seasoned police captain, and he also fooled the FBI profiler who was supposed to see through people's souls. He not only managed to completely clear himself of all suspicion, but even won the heart of the female agent who had been hunting him. After slipping away without a trace, Martin is already sitting on a train far away from Montreal. For a deeply narcissistic psychopath like him, escaping is never the real goal. Showing off is. He calls Ileana.
Somebody as beautiful and powerful as you doesn't fall for a faggy art dealer. Remember making love with all those pictures of the dead people around us? Let's face it, Ileana. An ordinary person.
Every word he says cuts into Ileana like a blade. This is not just a professional failure, but the destruction of her entire life. Because of this catastrophic mistake, Ileana is dismissed from the FBI, ruined and disgraced. She hides away alone on a remote country farm. 7 months later, snow is falling heavily, and Ileana stands there with a huge pregnant belly, looking weak and slow. She is carrying Martin's child, the result of that night of sin. And just as expected, Martin appears. For a pathologically narcissistic man like this, a child is an extension of himself, and he will never allow anyone else to touch what he believes belongs to him. He pours himself a cup of tea as if he owns the place, and as he looks at the heavily pregnant Ileana, his eyes are filled with a twisted kind of tenderness. James even imagines the two of them building a family together, and himself drawing pictures of their children playing. But Ileana rejects him. In an instant, James tears off the mask of warmth and slaps Ileana to the ground, showing no concern at all for the child in her belly, then pulls out that familiar garrote, the weapon he used to take so many lives. He wraps it around Ileana's neck from behind. Ileana struggles with everything she has and grabs the scissors on the table to fight back. But how could a woman on the verge of giving birth possibly stand against a man in his prime? Martin easily snatches the scissors away, raises them high, and drives them down hard toward Ileana's swollen belly, but there is no scream as expected, and no blood spraying out. And Ileana, who had looked weak just moments ago, suddenly pulls out a sharp dagger from nowhere and, with the speed and precision of a trained agent, drives it straight into Martin's heart. Martin stares at Ileana in disbelief, and she rips off that huge fake belly, revealing a silicone prop hidden underneath. It turns out that for these past 7 months, Ileana has been acting the whole time. Her dismissal was fake, her hiding was fake, and the pregnancy was fake too. She understood this hermit crab too well, and she knew that only an irresistible bait could make him come out on his own. She spent 7 whole months turning herself into a perfect trap. Martin collapses to the floor, barely breathing, and Ileana looks down at him from above. This is giving him a taste of his own medicine. You deceived me for 19 days, and I deceived you for 7 months. You spent your whole life pretending to be someone else, and in the end, you died inside a script written just for you by me. The reason Taking Lives became a classic is not only because of those final minutes of extreme reversal, but also because of the way it stares straight into the abyss of human nature. When you stare into the abyss stares back at you. A true strong person dares to jump into the abyss, turn themselves into a nightmare even more terrifying than the devil, and then end him with their own hands. What this film tells us is that you should never try to protect yourself with someone else's shell, because once you wear a mask for too long, you will never find your original face again. That is all for today's recap, and next time I will bring you another suspense thriller with a twist you will never see coming.